All right, so these are practice AP questions for Perfect Competition Part 2. So because there's a lot, let's just hop right into it. So question 23. A constant cost, perfectly competitive gadget industry is in long-run equilibrium. An increase in the number of consumer gadgets will most likely result in what? So here, it doesn't matter constant or increasing, although it technically does, right? Constant cost is just what we've been doing with our perfectly competitive graphs. And so if they're in long-run equilibrium, an increase in the number of consumer gadgets will do what? Well, it's going to increase demand in our market. And so when demand increases, our price and our quantity is also going to increase in the short run, right? And so here, right, the correct answer here is D, right? Because there's going to be a higher short run price because demand increases, price is also going to increase, followed by an increase in the quantity produced, which yet again makes sense. If demand increases, our quantity is also going to increase because of the rightward shift of the demand curve. 38. So the graph above shows the short run cost curves of a firm in a perfectly competitive market. Which of the following are true at the firm's profit maximizing output level? So remember, profit maximize is where MR equals MC, or we could rewrite this to say price equals marginal cost. So in other words, right here is going to represent our profit maximizing quantity. So let's look at this. 1, does price exceed our average total cost? Well, yes, right? Because our price is here. Our ATC is right here at this quantity. So 1 is correct. Number 2, economic profits are 0. Well, is that true? No, right? We know that 2 is not true because our ATC is below our marginal cost, right? And then the only way that economic profits are 0 is if the firm is in long-run equilibrium. So 2 is not correct. 3, marginal cost equals average total cost. Well, we disproved that with 1, right? If our marginal cost is right here at this profit maximizing quantity, our average total cost is beneath it, so it can't be equal to. So 3 is also incorrect. Number 4, new firms are likely to enter into the market in the long run. Well, remember, we said in the short run, if a firm is making a profit, firms are going to enter. They have an incentive to enter into the market. In the short run, if a firm is making a loss, other firms have incentives to leave the market here. And so here, because our ATC is below our price, this firm is making a profit. And because of that, other firms are incentivized to enter in the long run. So 4 is also correct. And so now we just have to find the answer choice that says 1 and 4 are the correct answers. And that should be answer choice C. All right, so question, let's call this 1. If a perfectly competitive industry is in long-run equilibrium, which of the following is most likely to be true? Well, remember, long-run equilibrium, right, is where we're absolutely efficient, where the minimum of the ATC intersects with marginal revenue and marginal cost. So A, some firms can be expected to leave the industry. Well, no, right, because there's no economic profit being made. So there is no incentive to leave or enter into the industry. So A is incorrect. B, individual firms are not operating at the minimum points on their average total cost curves. Well, that's true, right? They are operating at the minimum point. In long-run equilibrium, right, they are allocatively efficient, right? And they are also productively efficient, right? Allocative, remember, is min of ATC, or sorry, it's where MR equals MC. And productively efficient is minimum of the ATC equals our price. So B is incorrect. C, firms are earning a return on investment that is equal to their opportunity costs. And so this one is correct here, right? Mainly because remember, when we're talking about a normal profit, when firms are making no profit whatsoever, we're talking about in an economic sense, where we're taking into account the opportunity costs. So all C is saying is that they're saying that there is no economic profit here, right? That their opportunity costs, their implicit costs equals what the companies are receiving in return. So C is correct. All right, 25. A perfectly competitive firm is currently in long-run equilibrium, right? So yet again, we are at this graph right here. So if the total revenue is $100,000 and the average total cost of production is $100, which of the following can be concluded from this information? Well, we automatically know a couple things, right? We're in long-run equilibrium, so there should be no profit whatsoever. So here for part A, where it says profit is positive, we know that's not true. For answer choice C, profit is negative. That is not true. Answer choice E, profit is positive. We know E isn't true. So now all we're left with is B and D. Well, here, right, we don't necessarily care about the marginal cost as $1,000, right? What we care about is this is the profit maximizing output. So that's why we more care about the output is 1,000, not necessarily that the marginal cost is 1,000. So that's why D as in dog is the correct answer here. All right, so 10. Which of the following statements is true about a firm that sells its output in a perfectly competitive market? So here, right, a firm that sells in a perfectly competitive market. Well, is the demand for its product a downward sloping function? Well, no. And yet again, take a look at the questions. Ask about the firm, not the market itself. And the firm, we know that the demand curve is perfectly elastic, right, because they're price takers. B, the firm will earn zero economic profits in the long run. Well, that's true, right? In perfectly competitive market structures, in the long run, there is no economic profit to be made. So B as in boy is correct. Yet again, for the sake of exercise, let's go through the rest of the answer choices. C is incorrect because there is no advertising. D is incorrect, right? Because they can't change their price, right? They're price takers, not price makers. And so they're going to take the price at what the market dictates, or the equilibrium market price there. And E, right, the marginal revenue the firm receives from selling an additional unit will be different than the price. Well, we know that isn't true, right, because our marginal revenue is the same thing as our price there, right? So all this is basically leading us to B as in boy being the correct answer. 26. Assume that a firm that produces a good in a constant cost, perfectly competitive industry is in long run equilibrium, right? So yet again, right, we are here. And remember, when you're actually drawing it on like an FRQ, please make sure to label your curves here. If the demand for the good increases, the profit maximizing output by the firm will change in which of the following ways in the short run and long run. Right? So if demand shifts to the right, meaning the demand for the good increases, right? Then that means, right? So supply demand shifts to the right, right? Our equilibrium price gets raised. And so what happens? Well, in the short run here, right, the profit maximizing output is going to increase in the firm, right? Because MR equals MC is here, and then the new point is up here, right? So it increased, right? So we could get rid of all the answer choices that doesn't say increase, so we're left with B and C. And in the long run, remember, in the long run, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that the demand increases, firms are making a profit, so there's incentive for other firms to enter into it. So our supply is going to shift to the right, it's going to increase, which brings us back to this original curve, which means in the long run, everything returns to the original level. So C is the correct answer here. All right, question number 10, or the second question number 10. At the current production level of good X, price is greater than marginal cost. Which of the following actions would lead to greater efficiency? Okay, so here, anytime there is a tax or government intervention, it creates deadweight loss, right? You guys should remember that from Unit 2. So greater efficiency, deadweight loss is just inefficiency. So D and E is incorrect. We also know that C is incorrect because just maintain the current level of production, right? We are not producing where MR equals MC, which is the profit maximizing spot, which is extremely efficient. It's allocatively efficient. So C is not correct as well. And so the correct answer choice here should be B, right? If our price, which is our marginal revenue, which equals product, which is this curve right here, right, is greater than our marginal cost. Right? So if this is where we are at the marginal cost curve, and this is where we want to be, where MR equals MC, what do we need to do? We just need to increase production here. Decreasing production would just lead us in the other opposite direction, obviously. All right, the last multiple choice question, question number 9. Which of the following is true for a perfectly competitive firm in long-run equilibrium? Right? Well, it earns positive economic profit. No. It is allocatively efficient. Well, yes, right? It's allocatively efficient and it's also productively efficient in long-run equilibrium. So B is the right answer. Well, yet again, for exercise, let's go through the other 3. Does it experience economic losses? No, because in long-run equilibrium, there is no economic profit to be made. It is productively inefficient. That is also incorrect here. It maximizes revenues, right? No, it maximizes profit, It does not maximize revenue. It's a difference between the two. And so that is why B as in boy is the correct answer. And so that leads us to our FRQ. And so our FRQ is from 2010, right? And yet again, broken up into 4 different sections, 1 for each part. So here we're starting off with the assumption, right, that corn is produced in a perfectly competitive market. Farmer Roy is a typical producer of corn. And so if you notice, whenever you're drawing a graph, you have to label which one is the market, you have to label which one is the price. That's why we have market on the left and firm on the right. Please make sure, right, that you label your graphs. And then price and quantity on the y and x axis respectively. We assume that Farmer Roy is making 0 economic profit in the short run. Draw a correctly labeled side-by-side graph. All right, so let's just draw the graph here before looking at sub point 1 and sub point 2. Well, if he's making 0 economic profit, that's in the firm, right? So let's just look at the market. The market is just a simple supply and demand graph. That's all it is. And then here, right, where this equilibrium point is going to represent our marginal revenue, our demand, and our price, and also our average revenue. But if you just say MR equals D equals P, that should be good enough. We have our marginal cost curve, and then because we're producing at 0 economic profit, we're in long run equilibrium. And so that's why our ATC is going to intersect right here. All right, so let's look at subpoint 1 and 2. Well, the equilibrium price and quantity for corn market labeled PM1 and QM1 respectively. So in the corn market, we're supposed to label the quantity QM1. So label the price PM1. Well, subpoint 2, the equilibrium quantity for Farmer Roy labeled QF1. And there we go, right? So if you just drew this graph, you got all the points for part A. Well, let's look at part B. For Farmer Roy's corn, is the demand perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, relatively inelastic, or unit elastic? Explain. Well, we know, right? If Farmer's Roy corn, right? So he is the firm. We know that the demand curve is perfectly elastic, right? Because they're price takers. And so all you would need to say and write down is perfectly elastic, and the explanation is because he is a price taker. And that would be sufficient enough to get the full points for this question. So part C. So corn can be used as an input in the production of ethanol. The demand for ethanol has significantly increased. And so remember, this is the market and the firm, or Farmer Roy's farm, for corn here. And so if corn is used as the input in production of ethanol and the demand for ethanol has significantly increased, right, that is going to impact our demand for corn, right? Because more producers are going to demand corn to produce more ethanol. So subpoint 1 says, show on your graph the effect of the increase in demand for ethanol on the market price and label the new equilibrium prices PM2 and QM2. So we already said, right, that our demand curve is going to shift to the right. So let's label our new demand curve, right? And let's draw an arrow indicating the rightward shift. And then now we're supposed to label our new equilibrium price, right? So we label it QM2 and PM2. And then part 2 says, show on your graph in part A the effect of the increase in demand of ethanol on Farmer Roy's quantity of corn in the short run, labeling the quantity as QF2 here, right? So remember, we're just going to go to the new equilibrium point where supply meets the new demand, and that becomes, right, our new equilibrium. And then where MR equals MC now represents QF2, right? So that's another point. Part C, how does the average total cost for Farmer Roy at QF2 compare with PM2? This, in my opinion, is a very poorly worded question because it's not asking you anything economic. It's asking you just to find it on the graph, right? So here, right, at the average total cost, so we're going to do this in red, PM2 is up here, right? Or really where it intersects the ATC is up here. At the profit maximizing spot, it's right here, right? So here, we're going to say for part 3, the ATC at QF2, so right here, right, is lower than PM2. right? So yet again, this is at QF2, this is at PM2. So it's literal location on the graph here. Nothing to do with economics. You're just asking to pinpoint points on the graph, right? All right, the last part, part D. Corn is also used as an input in the production of cereal. What is the effect of the increased demand for ethanol on the equilibrium price and quantity in the cereal in the short run? Explain. Well, here, right, if corn is also used as an input in the production of cereal, well, we know, right, that the increase in demand for ethanol, right, if ethanol, the demand increases, right, we know from our previous graph that that is also going to increase demand for corn. Well, here, if the demand for corn increases, that is going to lead to an increase in the price of corn and also for the quantity of corn. But if the price of corn increases and corn is used as an input in the production of cereal, well, that means that the supply of cereals is going to decrease here. Why? Well, because corn got more expensive. And if corn is used to produce cereal and the price of corn increases, then the supply of cereal is going to decrease here. And so let's answer the rest of this question. Well, what's going to happen to the equilibrium price and quantity of the cereal market in the short run? Well, here, right, if the supply decreases for cereal, we know, right, that when supply decreases, our price is going to increase. Our price is going to decrease and our quantity, price is going to increase and our quantity is going to decrease here. So the correct answer is equilibrium price increases, equilibrium quantity decreases, and the explanation is because, right, this entire mapped out thing that eventually leads us to the supply decreasing for cereal, right? Of course, you can't just draw the arrows. You have to explain it out in words using full sentences. But yet again, for sake of time, I just drew out really the path for it, all right? All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. If you guys still have questions, feel free to send me an email or send me a message to remind. I'll be more than happy to chat more with you about these questions. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.